You can find all kinds of organizing gadgets out there. You can find like their little stair-step organizers so that the things that are in the back, you can see those. They're up higher in a cabinet. But also put the least used items in the back and the most used items in the front. If you go through your canned food items, sort them by what kind of food it is, like all your tomatoes, your green beans, your corn, your soups. Sort those out and then check the dates on them. You want to rotate things out. Put those in front, the ones with the lower date on them, but rotate them. That way you're using the oldest product first.
Although cleaning the refrigerator, oven, freezer, cabinets, and drawers is typically associated with spring, now is actually a good time to tackle those projects. Not only that, but you can also take an inventory of all the things you have in the kitchen. If you're like most, you'll probably discover that many of the things creating clutter aren't being used, are past their expiration dates, or there's simply too many utensils, gadgets, and spices. On today's Sound Living, some tips for better organizing your kitchen. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman. K-State Research and Extension food scientist Karen Blakeslee, who is also the coordinator of the university's Rapid Response Center, agrees that winter is a good time to organize and, in some cases, completely reorganize the kitchen.
The start of the new year, everybody's trying to get organized, clean things out, so why not start in the kitchen area and see what kind of mystery food you might find in your kitchen?
We actually store probably a lot more things in those cupboards than we realize, and because of the nature of a cupboard, some things get pushed to the back and you just almost forget they're even there.
Yeah, it's true, and I find that myself, so I'm guilty of that very thing. One way to do it is just take everything out of your cabinets. Do a good cleaning in there, because a lot of times packages break, and when that happens, that can invite pests, and you really don't want to have that kind of a problem in your cabinet. So clean everything out, wash them and let them air dry for a while, do that. If there's any holes in your cabinets where pests might get in, get out some caulk and plug them up so that you can prevent that from happening. Take everything out and then start weeding things out. If there's utensils or anything in your cabinets that you haven't really used for a year or more, same kind of theory that applies in your own closet. If you haven't worn a piece of clothing for a while, maybe it's time to get rid of it. Same thing applies in your kitchen. So if you got multiple spatulas and you don't need 10 spatulas, maybe it's time to pare down to maybe 2 of your favorites. If they're still good use, maybe give them to a relative that's just starting out, like a college student. Or take it to Goodwill, somewhere where things can be reused and people can pick up things for a really low price. Once you get those things sorted out, if you can put organizers in your drawers or anything like that, little bins of things like that to kind of keep things corralled and keep things in order, that will really help make sure you put things back where they are.
That's really what happens, isn't it? Is over time, things just kind of get all jumbled together. You can't find what you're looking for, which is not only sometimes a little bit dangerous when you're cooking and you can't find what you need, but just from a frustration standpoint of,
Yeah, especially, you've got so many things in your drawers and you can't get the drawer open, something needs to happen. And then in your cabinets, you can take small items like small boxes of pudding or gelatin, a sauce mix or something like that. Put those in a little bin or a basket or something so that they stay corralled and you can find them easier that way. Another thing to do, if you've got room to put storage on the back of a door, that's a real great place to store lightweight items, or even things like storage bags, foil, wax paper, plastic wrap, those kinds of things. And that way, you open the door, it's right there. If you're a baker, maybe you could find a spot in your kitchen to make a baking center. Keep all those items together that you would use in baking, your flour, your sugar, even down to brown sugar. If you're a bread baker, put your yeast in there, all those baking type things. Put those in the same location so you know where they are, even if you can put it with your mixer. And that way everything's in one spot. Your silverware, your plates and things like that, put those close to where the sink or the dishwasher is so that way once they're dry, You can easily reach and put them in there. Put your most used items where it's easy for you to grab. One thing I read was to put those most used items between your shoulders and your knees, and least often used items, put those up high. Put those above the stove or above the refrigerator, like my cookie cutters. I use those primarily only around Christmas. So I've got those in a big jar, and I put them above my refrigerator. I know where they're at, but they're not cluttering up my drawers.
What about in terms of just trying to rearrange things so that they're easier to find in the cabinets? Can you go smaller to bigger, most used?
Yeah, you can certainly do that. You can find all kinds of organizing gadgets out there. You can find like their little stair-step organizers so that the things that are in the back, you can see those. They're up higher in a cabinet. But also put the least used items in the back and the most used items in the front. If you go through your canned food items, sort them by what kind of food it is, like all your tomatoes, your green beans, your corn, your soups. Sort those out and then check the dates on them. You want to rotate things out. Put those in front, the ones with the lower date on them, but rotate them. That way you're using the oldest product first. One thing I read when a person cleaned out their cabinet, she had 4 bottles of balsamic vinegar in her cabinet. Did she need 4 bottles? Probably not. But, if you're trying to remember what you have in your cabinet, you tend to spend more money. So going through this organizing process can also save you some money. Find out what you have so you don't overspend. And then also by eliminating those things that are way out of date. If you've got some canned food items that are 4 years old, 5 years old, it's probably time to throw those away. A personal story of my own, I will admit I had some canned cream soup for 4 or 5 years. Why? I don't know. But what I did was I did open it up just to see what it looked like. And you'll see those kinds of things separate. You'll see a lot of watery content in there. So the quality of them really goes down over time. The other thing, when you're storing foods, canned foods or even dried foods, store them in a cool, dry, dark location. Away from the furnace, away from your water heater, not under the sink, not close to the stove. They'll store a lot longer because temperature changes can lower the quality, lower the storage time. Light can change the quality, especially if they're in a jar or something like that. So those kinds of things can cause the shelf life of those foods to go down. And then get them all organized in a way that you can find things easily.
My wife and I actually did this the other day. We went through all of our spices. We've got them on a Lazy Susan where we can rotate them around and see what's on there. But we were amazed at how old some of those spices were. We actually think some of them may date back to when we were married in 1985.
Yes, and spices do not last forever. So, really, open it up. If you can't smell it, it's time for it to go. The rule of thumb on spices in general is 6 months to a year. Some of them you can kind of revive by putting them in a pan in a skillet and heat them up a little bit. Sometimes that'll bring out the oils and some of the herbs and spices. But if they're getting over a year old, it's probably time to throw them away.
What about just some general tips for checking dates?
Sometimes consumers can easily get confused by what does that date mean on a package. There are sell-by dates, and those are typically used for your perishable type foods like your milk, eggs, cheese, meats, those kinds of things. And that's a reminder not only for you, but for the grocery that is the last day they can sell that product. But that's also a reminder to you, you really need to use that too. Those kinds of things you really have to use up quickly. Bread, same kind of thing. Those are your sell-by dates. Use-by dates, and there's also best if used-by dates. Those are typically more for quality and flavor. That date indicates this is what we think you will have the best quality by this date or the best flavor by this date. Things don't last forever. So after those dates, you might see more off flavors, colors might change. I talked about soups earlier where separation can occur, like in the cream type soups. So the use by and best if used by dates really are more for quality and flavor. Sometimes you'll also see on canned foods, you might see a code number. Typically a 4-digit code number. That's what we call a Julian date. It may say best if used by this number. That Julian date is the number of the day of the year. Day 1 would be 001. December 31st is 365. Sometimes they'll put a number in front of that to indicate the year. But try to follow those dates the best you can for the best safety, the best quality, and the best flavor. A general rule of thumb for canned foods. High acid type foods. This would be like your fruits, your tomatoes, pickles, and things like that. For your commercially canned high acid foods, general rule of thumb is 12 to 18 months. For low acid foods, this would be your green beans, your vegetables, your soups, and things like that. 2 to 5 years. But just as a reminder for those that do home canning, we recommend that those home canned foods be used within 1 year for best safety, quality, and flavor.
What about those items that say refrigerate after opening, but Grandma never did? What does that mean?
It's a safety, but it's also a quality thing. You'll preserve the quality of those items, like jellies, for example. You're going to dip into those more than once. And the more times you stick a spoon or a knife into those things, you could be contaminating it. And by refrigerating it, that will help slow the growth of any bacteria that might be there. The other thing, for example, we're talking about jellies. Once you start opening it and you expose it to the air and you start putting a spoon in there and taking it out every once in a while, yeast could form, and then things will start fermenting. So you're really going to affect the quality and safety of items like that. So once you open a can of food or a jar of food that's been canned or processed like that, you really should store it in the refrigerator for the best safety.
What about also inside the refrigerator? Because that is another area that also becomes cluttered and needs to be cleaned out, well, probably more so than once a year, but definitely needs some attention.
Absolutely, because spills happen. And you might find some food that's way down in the drawer buried that you didn't know you had. And if it's starting to get a little fuzzy on it, it's time to throw that out. Again, take everything out of your refrigerator. Clean the shelves, clean the door shelving area, take the drawers out, clean those. Most often you have to clean all this stuff by hand. Really can't get those kinds of things in the dishwasher. So it does take a little labor, but clean them real well. If you can sanitize them, do that too. Use simple little bleach water on the shelves. Even just a tablespoon of plain bleach in a gallon of water, that can sanitize things. But again, organize things in your refrigerator. If you got little pieces of onion and celery, maybe it's time to make a soup. Get those things used up. And you need to rotate things in your refrigerator just like you do in your cabinets. Freezer, same thing. I think you find a lot of mystery things more often in a freezer than anything else, especially if you don't label things. One thing you can do to help remind you to label things is where you store your storage bags and your foil and your wrapping and things like that. Keep a marker right there with it. That can help remind you to label things, put a date on it. Things don't last forever in a freezer. So the storage for freezer items kind of depends on the food. We have some refrigerator freezer guidelines and a publication that can help you decide what to keep and what to throw out. If your freezer is big enough that you can organize things in maybe plastic bins or something like that, and that way you can find things easier.
Yeah, there really are a lot of things out there that will help people, especially if you've got arthritis or if you just have a little bit of a mobility problem. You're short, there's step stools. Really just look for things that make your life a little easier.
That's right. There's more gadgets out there these days than ever. If you have trouble with your canned foods or jars, you have trouble opening and closing them, there's all kinds of gadgets out there to help you. Even opening the cans that have the little tabs on them. There's a gadget to help open those kinds of things too. But keeping things organized can help your brain remember what you have in the freezer. You could even make a list. Take a magnet and put it on the outside of the freezer so you know what you have in there.
That's Karen Blakeslee, a K-State Research and Extension food scientist and the coordinator of the university's Rapid Response Center. To learn more about organizing your kitchen or practicing proper food safety, contact the county or district extension office in your area. Sound Living is a weekly public affairs program produced by Research and Extension at Kansas State University. I'm Jeff Wichman, and this is the K-State Radio Network.